Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel. FPL Vincenzo here, and obviously international break time, so no big players to look at for this week yet. That will come in next week's pod. So I thought I'd have a little look here at formations, because it's been, I think, spoken about a little bit in the community in the last couple of weeks. I've mentioned it on a couple of my previous pods as well, around, are we witnessing a change here? Should we be playing a different formation? I think historically we've been trained to play either 3-4-3 or 3-5-2. Not that defenders can't do well, but you can pick three attacking defenders. You can still have a good four in midfield, and particularly last year, where there was an extra weighting, it felt like, towards strikers, we could play three up front because they was getting more bonus points. Goals were being arguably worth more than the normal four because of the bonus points, etc. But 3-4-3, 3-5-2 were both more than valid. This year, particularly because of DEFCON, and obviously we've spoken about it a lot, a bit big buzzword in the community now. People are now considering playing more defenders. On my free hit in game week 4, I was very keen to play 5 at the back. I haven't deployed that tactic in my normal team yet, and still at the moment I'm really largely playing 3 at the back. But I'm open-minded and very aware right now that that might need to change, and 4 or even 5 at the back might need to become more realistic and might be the best way to get more points. I've done a couple of slides here looking at sort of points so far, should we say, this season. And the first big takeaway, I think, at the moment is you can see clearly here how well defenders are doing. So for those on audio, there's the top 17 point scorers in the game for this season. They've all scored 39 points or more. And they're broken into 2 sections. So those that have scored 42 or more, there's 9 of those. And those that have scored between 39 and 41, and there's 8 of those. So let's deal, obviously, with the first 9 first. So for those on audio, again, it's Haaland, Semenyo, Timber, Gabriel, Gahey, Senesi, Caicedo, Byrne, and Calafiori. So immediately jumps out there 6 defenders within the top 9 point scorers. And some of those started the season incredibly cheap. Senesi and Gahey in particular at 4.5, outscoring loads of players more expensive than them. So not necessarily all DEFCON picks either. Senesi obviously has been a bit of a darling for DEFCON. Gahey has been getting it fairly frequently, but sort of bolstered slightly by attacking returns as well. Newcastle doing well for clean sheets for Dan Burn. Obviously 3 Arsenal guys there have balanced clean sheets with some attacking returns. So 6 there, 2 midfielders. So Semenyo obviously been absolutely flying, really stepped up a level with his finishing in particular. Always had good underlying data, always took a lot of shots. This year, at the start of this season, they've converted into more returns, 66 points already. He's only 4 behind Haaland, 70. And Caicedo on 45, helped by DEFCON, but arguably an unusually high quantity of attacking returns as well. I wouldn't see that continuing necessarily over the season, the amount of goals he scored. But still, the 7th highest scoring player in the game right now on 45 points, another cheap option. On the other side, this is maybe a little bit more in line with expectation. So 4 midfielders here between 39 and 41, Jadon Anthony, Enzo Fernandez, Declan Rice and Mokudas. 2 goalkeepers, interestingly, Nick Pope and Roeths. Another defender in Alderate from Sunderland, and Joel Pedro, after that blistering start to the season, still hanging on as well, 39. But so yeah, 17 players that have scored 39 points or more. And clearly the big takeaway is that goalkeepers and strikers are basically the same. So 2 goalkeepers have got 39 points or more, 2 strikers. And take Haaland out of the equation, who's obviously absolutely flying right now with 70 points. There's not really strikers to be seen. I say Pedro has made the list on 39, but he's on quite a barren run right now. So clear evidence from here is that 3 strikers is not desirable, because only 2 on this list, and one of those is arguably out of form. 7 defenders with 6 midfielders, and notably, look at the certain types of midfielders we get. Semenyo maybe is more of the attacking midfield type we would expect to see on this list. Kudus, probably a bit the same. But Caicedo, Rice and Enzo, all on here. So Caicedo, I suppose you'd call fairly defensive. Maybe some would generously call him box to box. Declan Rice has quite a similar profile to Caicedo, but Arsenal use him more box-to-box than Chelsea use Caicedo. And Enzo, another one, who's the box-to-box version of Rice, but maybe getting a few more minutes slightly higher since Cole Palmer's been injured. So I would argue here we've got a 6, an 8 and a 10, but all capable at least of playing quite box-to-box roles. So that obviously gives them possibilities of DEFCON. In Rice's case, he takes some set pieces, but all three of them prone to the occasional goal. And we've got some of those returns already this season. So looking at this data, the preference really is for defenders. Not only is there most of them in 7, but so on that first side of the screen, those that have got 42 points or more, there's 6 out of 9. So 2/3, quite clearly for those with good maths, 2/3 of the top point scorers so far are defenders. Is that an argument really at least to be playing 4 at the back? I think there's an argument for those that want to play 5, it makes sense. But as a bare minimum here, we should be playing 4. And then also midfield should take precedent over the strikers. 6 midfielders on the list, albeit not necessarily the attacking type of midfielders, and 2 strikers. So looking at this, to me, this suggests to me 4-4-2 is fairly good. I think 5-3-2 could work. I think even 5-4-1 could work. Certainly no argument here to play 3 at the back. Certainly no argument here to play 3 strikers. So anything away from those 2 formations seem to make a degree of sense here. If I jump on then as a comparison to last year, so I have a vague memory of what we just saw, and then we'll go to the first 7 game weeks of the 24-25 season and look at how the game's different. So no difference at the top. Haaland doing as well as last year, actually a bit better. He was on 67 points through 7 game weeks last year. His decline had maybe just started, or his capabilities of big returns are just of not getting a big return had just started. He started to get a few blanks, but still had 67 points at this point. Cole Palmer also on 67 points at this year. But look at this collection of attacking midfielders here. So we had Palmer, Salah in the 60s, and then Mbeumo, Saka and Luis Diaz in the 50s. So they're the sorts of midfielders we've been trained to pick in FPL, sort of in front threes in a lot of cases, having lots of shots and big goal threats. So those 6 players were comfortably ahead. Big gap then from Mbeumo to Madueke, 51 points to 43. Nicholas Jackson, the only other player that managed 42. So we had 8 players last year on 42 or more, compared to 9 this year. But again, the attacking midfielders and the strikers were a bit more dominant. No defenders in this list. So on the other side, it was 6 out of 9 players in this points bracket with defenders. Now we've got 0 out of 8. And instead it's 6 out of 8 midfielders and those midfielders that we're accustomed to owning, along with 2 strikers. Down the other side, it's a little bit more balanced. So 9 players here, this time between 39 and 41, and a collection of players. Andre Onana as a goalkeeper here. A couple of defenders, Trent Alexander-Arnold on 41 and Gabriel 39. A couple of midfielders as well, Dwight McNeil, Kai Havertz and James Maddison. And then Ollie Watkins, Danny Welbeck and Chris Wood, the 3 Ws. I think a few people had that as their front 3 for a period last year, all in there as well. So you can see Trent, initially the highest scoring defender on 41 points. He's got 6 defenders better in what Trent was. And I think 41 points last year through 7 game weeks was considered nice pacing for Trent. I don't think there was a feeling here he'd underachieved to get 41 points through 7. I think Liverpool, from memory, started last year quite well for clean sheets. Maybe his attacking returns didn't quite sort of reach the threshold he was expecting. But I think if he was expecting 6 points a game from Trent over a season, I think that would have been considered good and decent money spent on a defender at his price bracket. This is probably another form of evidence, really, towards how good these defenders are. That we've got 6 beating him, and they're all cheaper than sort of Trent's sort of peak price. So that's one significant thing. And say these midfielders, it's the ones that play on the shoulder. It's the one that look to get into the box. It's the ones that look to take shots. It's those that are, shall we say, more premium, that have been doing very well. All of these midfielders on this list, maybe Dwight McNeil isn't a big goal threat, but took set pieces, generally was considered a good crosser of a ball, more of an assist player than a goal player, but still not those sort of defensive-minded mids, those box-to-box mids that played quite centrally. And again, more strikers here. So 5 make the list in total. And so it's more to do, I think, here with strikers scoring goals doing so well for BPS, that often, obviously, that gave them a few extra points each game as well. But Jackson, Welbeck, Watkins and Wood all sort of matching what Joel Pedro's been doing this year. We've only got one striker sort of at that capability at the moment. So just as a quick recap here, we've gone from 2 goalkeepers, 7 defenders, 6 midfielders and 2 strikers achieving 39 points or more. So 1 goalkeeper from 2, 7 defenders from just 2 last year, 6 midfielders now instead of 9 last year, and 2 forwards now instead of 5 last year. So clearly big positive towards defenders, sort of achieving basically an average of 6 points a game or more. Fewer midfielders now, and certainly a few fewer attackers. So here is the current team of the season on the next slide, plus some general questions I think we should be asking ourselves now. So the team of the season revealed by official FPL is Roeth's in goal, Senesi, double Arsenal defensive, Gabriel and Timber, back 5 with Guehi and Burton at the back. Semenyo with Jaden Anthony and 2 Chelsea midfielders, Caicedo and Enzo, and Haaland up front. That would be the optimal team so far, set up in a 5-4-1. So I guess the big question is trying to work out now what's sustainable and what's not sustainable. The DEFCON, I think we feel like, is sustainable. Those that are getting those 10 defensive contributions every game, I think will still continue to get it at similar pacing. So looking at these defenders, you maybe need to do a little bit more digging here into how they've got their points. So let's look at the 2 Arsenal guys first. Jurriën Timber has 6 starts for Arsenal, and in total he's got 7 returns from his 6 starts. He's had 2 goals and 2 assists in 6 starts, and also 3 clean sheets in his 6 starts. Now, Arsenal averaging 50% clean sheet capability, so 3 and 6. I think that probably is sustainable. Timber, I would say, is the least attacking of the 2 Arsenal fullbacks. When Calafiori's playing, I think it's given a bit more license to get up the pitch and appear more centrally on the pitch. So I think Timber's maximised his output so far. I don't think an attacking return 2 in every 3 games is sustainable. So I think he's overachieved so far in terms of that. So I think his points per game, or points per start, which is currently at 8 points at the moment, I think we have to think that's going to regress. But clean sheet wise, which is obviously the bread and butter for defenders, I think is fairly sustainable. And I think a pacing more in line with Gabriel is more realistic. So Gabriel's had an extra start to Timber, and that's meant he's got an extra clean sheet. So 4 and 7, I think that's reasonably sustainable for Arsenal. Gabriel's obviously had the 1 goal recently, no assist. So 1 goal contribution to go with 4 clean sheets, 5 returns from 1 extra appearance compared to Timber's 7. He's running along at 6.7 points per start. That probably is slightly more sustainable at the moment. He has had 3 DEFCON contributions so far in 7 starts as well, Gabriel. I think that's reasonable as well. It'll be interesting, though, what happens in this next block, because Arsenal are running into a set of fixtures that I think most people would label as easier. Maybe teams that are more expected to finish mid-table, bottom half. That might be games Arsenal dominate more with the ball, and they sustain more pressure, pen the opposition back, swamp them in their own half effectively. What does that mean for Gabriel's DEFCON capabilities? You'd imagine he'd have less defending to do. That might mean this DEFCON rate slows down. So I think there's an argument Gabriel was quite slightly overachieved in terms of DEFCON, but not by much. Slightly overachieved in terms of clean sheets, but probably, again, not by much. Certainly not to the level of Timber's attacking returns. I think both of those 2 are good. I would still, I think, personally pay the slight extra for Gabriel, who's now 6.3 compared to Timber's 5.9. But they're both overachieving slightly. Then on to Mark Guehi. He's also had 7 starts. Palace, 3 clean sheets in 7. Just under 50% return rate for clean sheets. That might be sustainable, maybe a bit high. I would say something like 1 in 3 is probably not a bad level of return for Palace clean sheet-wise. That would put them on sort of 12, 13 for the season. So maybe not a big overachievement here, but a bit like Timber, maybe the attacking returns are quite high. He had 1 goal and 2 assists in the first 7 weeks. Now, again, another 2 assists for England last night. So maybe he's just one of those centre-backs that he's naturally going to find the ball in and around him in the box. The ball he gravitates towards the ball. He's got a good sense of timing. But he hasn't necessarily shown that historically, this sort of level of attacking return, shall we say. So 3 and 7 to me feels a bit high. 3 DEFCONs in 7 I think is fine. I think I'd probably expect that to go up a little bit. I think he's more likely than Gabriel to get DEFCON, and they're on the same so far. So maybe a little bit of improvement there. He's on 6.6 points per start. So basically the same as Gabriel. And it almost feels like it costs 1.4 million less. So if Gahey's going to get more DEFCON than Gabriel might slightly outdo him for clean sheets. Those two are going to pace, I think, fairly evenly over the course of this season, would be my guess. So if you don't have either, which I don't right now, who should my priority be? We'll get on to this we'll call it part 2 of this pod next week before the next deadline. But if I want to make a defender transfer, I've got decisions, and these two are right at the top of the list. But my gut feeling is right now, get towards the end of the season, I think these two will be fairly closely linked in terms of points. Certainly, I don't think Gabriel will outperform Gahey by enough to justify sort of $1.5 million price difference between them. So something to bear in mind there. Then we've got Senesi, who's in and around them as well. He's like Gahey, averaging 6 points per start. Gone up to 5 million now, where Gahey's gone up to 4.9. The only difference between them is the extra goal, really, Gahey scored. So they're both on 2 assists. Gahey has a goal, Senesi doesn't. Senesi has 3 more lots of DEFCON that Gahey doesn't. Again, I think the DEFCON is more sustainable than the attacking returns. So he's another one. 6 DEFCON in 7 is a lot, but I don't think it's unreasonable to think this will be sustained if he keeps playing. Obviously, the one game he didn't get DEFCON as well was when he was subbed off in the second half when Bournemouth were chasing a game. Now, there's a plausibility that could happen again. If Bournemouth are 1 goal down, 2 goals down with 25 minutes to go, could Senesi go off, an extra attacker be brought on, slight formation change to chase the game? Yes. And therefore, that might, if you know now he's a defender that's most likely to be taken off to accommodate that, that might be a slight negative towards him. Because, again, you're not going to get the clean sheet points, because I think he's only going to be taken off in those circumstances if Bournemouth are losing. So the early sub in his case isn't that beneficial, where it could be for other defenders. But, yeah, I think that the DEFCON could be sustained. The attacking returns may be a bit higher, but I think he'll be in and around that same sort of points total as Gabriel and Gahey at the end of the season for quite a lot less. So my feeling right now is that Gahey and Senesi will offer more in terms of value, in terms of points per million. The big question at the moment is, because the premiums are underachieving, then arguably, do we need to spend more money in attacking players like we did, like maybe last year when we saw Mbeumo and Thacker and Salah and Palmer near the top of the points? If we're going to get to a sort of a situation this year where those attacking players just aren't worth it, then obviously Gabriel still becomes a genuine option at 6.3. But if we reach the point where we are looking at Haaland plus 1 or 2 other premiums, then I think you could argue that Gabriel is not going to match, or not going to give the same points per million value as the likes of Gahey and Senesi. Dan Burns, the 5th defender, so he's averaging 6.1 points per game. And the big difference, obviously, here with him is that he's only got 3 lots of DEFCON out of 7. That's not bad. Issue being at the moment that I think for the foreseeable, he may spend more time at left back than at centre back because of injuries to Livramento and Lewis Hall and things like that. We could now end up with something more regular like Burn, Botman, Cher and Trippier as the back 4. Obviously could play centre back if Newcastle switch it up and play back 3s, and it allows them to play like Jacob Murphy as a wing back or something. But 5 clean sheets in 7 I don't think is sustainable. They're running at a very high rate, Newcastle. Even though I think tactically they've adapted a little bit to try and sort of make games just closer and limit games to low XG. I think they've been defensively solid, and their focus has been on almost defence first in a way, and not allowing opponents to play through them. Interesting patch coming up though, with more Champions League games, a few injuries to manage and things like that. So Burn, I don't think is necessarily a good pickup now, and I think his rate will drop off because I say the DEFCON will reduce playing at left back, and 5 clean sheets in 7 pacing is too high. So wouldn't necessarily consider him. But if you went in now with a permanent back 4 of Timber, Gabriel, Gahey and Senesi moving forward, I think that's fine. And I think the challenge will be looking at other defenders now and who is now going to start to score at a similar rate. Because and Calafiore is also on the list, averaging 6 points per start right now. If we look at the next sort of block of fixtures, which other defenders from other teams that have maybe not delivered so far can start achieving sort of defend returns at sort of 6 points per start. Will it be more Palace? Will Lacroix now suddenly get Gahey levels of attacking returns for the next block, or Richards or someone like that? If we think Palace are still good defensively, and so I thought sort of that sort of pacing 3 and 7 is good, maybe that Lacroix and Richards are the next defenders to sort of appear at averaging 6 points per start. Are they going to be the upcoming blocks version of what Dan Burn's been for the first sort of 6-7 game weeks of the season? So something to monitor there. But have a look through the fixtures yourself. Maybe you think a Man City defender might emerge now as a genuine good option defensively. Will one of those, will Ruben Diaz start getting enough DEFCON or something like that? Or Gavardio, will he sort of become the next version of Gabriel almost in that way? So things to consider there, because I think Burn will drop off, but I think new players will emerge in this bracket. On to the midfielders, and we'll start with the Chelsea guys. And I say Moises Caicedo, I think, arguably the biggest overachiever so far. 3 goals in 7 for a defensive midfielder is sort of pacing towards a 16-goal season. And I don't think we're going to get that out of Moises Caicedo. So he's clearly overachieved. DEFCON 12 so far. 8 so far. So 4 lots of DEFCON in 7. I think that's reasonable that can carry on at that sort of pacing. A little bit of a top up here. Chelsea have had 2 clean sheets. I think that's fine in 7. He's got some BPS as well, probably largely spearheaded by the goals. So again, not a bad pickup. Obviously a big sort of price increase already to 5.8. But let's be fair, 3 goals in 7 inflates that. So he's going to drop off, not drastically necessarily. I still think he'll tick along with DEFCON, where he's averaging sort of 6.4 points per start right now. I think something more like in the 4s or low 5s is maybe something a bit more sustainable. Maybe he'll pace along at sort of the Ilman in Njai sort of pacing through the first half of the season, which will still be good. But if you're buying him now, I think you're buying him not necessarily too late, but expecting for the next block, the returns that those who've owned him all the way through are going to get. He's probably a bit optimistic. Enzo, on the other hand, is probably more appealing right now. He's more expensive at 6.7 compared to 5.8. 5 returns in 7, probably again a bit high. 3 goals, 2 assists. Little bit of bonus, one game of DEFCON so far for him. I'll say this, I mentioned it briefly earlier, but the one significant thing with Enzo at the moment is he has been given a more attacking role. Particularly with Palmer's injury, he is playing more as a 10, I would say, /8. And if he's in that role, he's obviously going to be quite high up the pitch. Outside chance he might take a penalty if João Pedro's off the pitch when they get one. So he is a genuinely good own, I think, right now. 5.9 points per start is, I think, sustainable for him. Maybe a little bit higher, but I don't see a massive drop in terms of him. So if I was buying into Chelsea now, I think he's the one I would want. And he's quite an interesting pickup. I think 6.7 is a fair price. Can we do, but it's the same price as Kudus. Who's going to do better? Is it slightly more than Njai? Is Enzo better than those guys? I think that's up for debate. But in terms of a bit of an exciting pick for the next block, I wouldn't put people off. I think what we've got from him so far is relatively sustainable. Maybe the goals will slow down slightly. But I think he'll tick along quite nicely with sort of a blend of attacking returns, goals and assists, and some DEFCON, some BPS, and lots of minutes in a team that do score goals and can win penalties. The other 2 in midfield, Jadon Anthony, 4 goals in 7. Again, that's pacing towards like a 20-goal season. That's realistically going to slow down, we would think, but he is shooting. So any player that's having shots is obviously putting themselves in contention to score. Talisman player for a weaker team. At 5.7, he's not bad. And of the midfielders probably below 6 million right now, he's probably the most exciting. If you're the sort of manager that wants to chase upside, I can see that 5.7, it gives you opportunities each week for upside, because Burnley don't score a lot of goals as well. If he scores, he's probably going to put himself in serious contention for bonus points. We can't imagine Burnley are going to keep loads of clean sheets, so he's not competing with the defenders. If Burnley are involved in a lot of 1-1 type games, or even if they lose 2-1 and he scores, he could well be in the BPS for that. So a midfielder who's getting into attacking positions, is taking shots, talisman player. He's almost like an inferior version of what Jared Bowen tended to be for West Ham in the past. We've been quite happy to own him. If you're getting Jared Bowen for 2.5 million cheaper, he's worthy of consideration. So I think he'll slow down a bit, but value for money, I think you'll get it from him. I think he can tick along at 4 or 5 points per game. He's averaging 5.9 at the moment. Then Semenyo, obviously a massive overachiever, 9.4 points per start, 6 goals and 3 assists in 7 appearances is crazy. In terms of attacking returns, only one behind Haaland. Haaland's on 10, Semenyo's on 9. So this is going to slow down. I don't think he's shooting loads. I think a lot of his shots are going in, but he's still. There's no reason to sell him, right? He's easily the most easy midfielder to own right now. We know Bournemouth aren't in Europe. His minutes are secure, etc., etc. Why you wouldn't own him, I don't know. And realistically, even if he drops down to 5-6 points per start, sort of the pacing of what Caicedo's been getting, even if you're getting sort of 40 points over a 7-game week block, I think that's fine for a midfielder that most of us played like 7.5 for or something like that. I don't know what you expect for someone, even at 8 million. If they're achieving 5-6 points per start for 8 million, I think that's pretty good going. So no concerns with him, but I say expecting the level of returns we're getting right now is not sustainable. And Haaland, obviously, at the end of this, 9 goals in 7, 1 assist to go with it, matching last year's return through the first 7. So I wouldn't think it's sustainable because he's pacing towards a 350-point FPL season, which we're sort of going into sort of unknown territory there. But Man City are creating for him. He's a talisman of the team. He's getting lots of shots. His confidence is high. City have adjusted the way they play, I think, towards maximising his output again. The system seems to be working. I don't really expect this to slow down anytime soon. I think he can score 1 goal a week. Maybe get some bonus for it. There'll be odd games where he gets more than that. I think if you're ticking along 8 points per game out of Haaland, I think that's pretty good. And that's what we're kind of looking for. If he scores, you kind of do expect him to get at least 1 bonus point, even if City keep a clean sheet. Although the weighting has dropped for strikers scoring for bonus compared to last year. I don't see too many games where he scores and gets no bonus to go with the goal. So looking at this, will the defenders regress? These are the questions I've asked myself. I think most of them will, but maybe not to a level that really worries. I think, say, Gabriel, Senesi and Gahey in particular, I think will stay fairly consistent. Timber will still do well enough, I think, to keep with them. Burn will drop, but there'll be another defender that probably comes into that 5th defender spot instead. Can we identify that player? Would it be a Man City defender? Will it be Lacroix? Someone like that. If Fulham start keeping some clean sheets, will it be Joachim Andersen? So there's things to consider, but I think 5 at the back is still more than valid. In midfield, I think Semenyo will still pace well enough to stay in this sort of team, even if it drops from his current points return to something more like 6 points per game, which is more realistic. I think Enzo will tick along at a similar rate, so he's fine. Caicedo slows down. Anthony probably slows down. But we've got to expect that at least one of these premium midfielders, whether it's Eze now for Arsenal, if Odegaard's out for a bit, whether Saka now being back in the team starts to pick up, Mbeumo's got really good underlying data, will he start to get a few more returns to go with it? I think it's valid that you'll find 4 midfielders here that can still pace at 6-7 points per start. Semenyo and Enzo can stay. Maybe we lose one of the DEFCON guys in Caicedo here and get a more attacking 2 instead. And then Haaland, I think, will be fine as well. So here's the challenge for us. Can we identify from this team of the season so far, if I'm expecting 4 or 5 to drop out, who comes in? And the second question sort of in the considerations here is around this team is more about spreading funds because there's so many budget options here and Haaland is basically a perma captain. You can spread the funds. And I think a lot of managers now will be tempted to do that because none of the premiums are really delivering. Gyökeres has obviously been quite frustrating. Nothing out of Ollie Watkins for those that had him. Cole Palmer couldn't stay fit. Saka's been injured. So most of the premiums haven't lived up to expectation and not pacing towards 200, 250 point seasons, which you might want from them. what happens in this next block? Is Isak going to start finding some goals? Is Saka going to come back into the team and start scoring goals? Those that are on wildcard now, which there are people, have got this is probably their biggest headache. Do they want to, say, spread the funds and have a deeper squad and more mid-price players? If you have that and one or two premiums start to exceed expectation and you find you want them, how do you get them in? So do you put Saka in there now as almost like a placeholder that he becomes any premium that starts doing well? I do think the premiums will rise again. It's just how immediate will it be? But I don't doubt that by sort of game week 12, game week 13, we might want what I'll call 3 premiums again. Haaland will be there. We might want Isak. We might want Saka. Maybe Palmer will be back fit and firing by that point. And if you've gone in a direction here that involves spreading money thinly, you may have trouble getting back to that. But for the first block of the season, the first 7 weeks, spreading the money has clearly been the better strategy. And the final question here is around, do we just pick more of a set and forget team? Something like this on the screen, this 5-4-1, with 3 capable subs, but subs that we just permanently know are on the bench regardless. So do you put Alderete on there? Obviously made one of the slides earlier. Do we put Thiago from Brentford as one of the backup strikers and something like Dominic Calvert-Lewin or something as one of the backup strikers? But just accept you're playing 5-4-1 every week. And those 3 are just there for emergencies? Or are we still looking at picking a playable squad, should we say, of 12 or 13 and having 2 decisions to make every week in terms of who you start or bench? Because, especially for someone like Caicedo so far, I don't think his returns have been overly predictable. And it's more than likely if you did own him and were using him as part of a sort of a weekly decision rotation, you might have benched him for the wrong games. Lots of people fell foul to that last year with people like Rodgers, Semenyo, Ismail Assar, players like that, which I've spoken about on previous pods, that really hard to work out when to play them, when to bench them. You've been better off just playing them all the time and accept that over a block, your points per game would have been really good. So there's an argument here, I think, going towards 5-4-1, going towards set and forget, and maybe looking at a draft that's got 2 premiums. I'm not going to talk about my team today, but these are decisions I'm going to have moving forward because I'm not set up in this way. I've played my wild card. Not that I'm unhappy with my current team, but there's 4 or 5 players there that I would gladly move on. I'm aware that I'm in the wrong formation. So there's lots of things that I could try to fix. And the big question for me, I think, for the next block of games is how quickly do I try and fix them? Do I take hits? Do I roll and wait 2 or 3 weeks and then make 3 transfers at once to try and fix a few things? Do I carry on playing the way I have been lately, which is 1 transfer per week, and look to make optimal weekly transfers? And then when the time's right, take a -4 or -8 or something to fix it. So we'll get on to sort of questions like that around my team next week, with sort of from an angle that these sort of decisions that you might be thinking about for your teams as well. So yeah, that'll be it for this one. This is, just what is the best formation to play. Everything right now is pointing towards 5-4-1. The question becomes do you want to play the game like that? Is that fun enough? Ultimately, some people will take the mindset, understandably here, that points are fun, green arrows are fun, high overall ranks are fun. But some people just like to watch the games, like to be updated by the scores each weekend and see their players scoring goals and getting attacking returns. Where that draft in the 5-4-1 right now has got a lot of players, they're getting their points through other means. And does that satisfy the reasons you play FPL enough to play like that? Also, it's how you feel about being on template versus being a bit risky, being a bit off template. I've naturally been a player who's been, should we say, a little bit more maverick, not being keen to be a sheep in the template. I've often done that by picking differential players, not by playing a very different formation. And I think eventually, and fairly quickly, I think most people will then realise to go to 4 at the back. I think most people will. I think the next block's going to be tricky because most people already have. We'll get onto this in more detail next week. Haaland, Pedro, and Gyökeres is quite a common strike force right now. With the fixtures coming up for those 3 teams, they won't sell. But Gyökeres could be gone when Arsenal's fixtures change, what do they do with that spot? Do people move him to Voltemate or to Isak, who have good fixtures? Do they come down to the budget option to then bolster other positions, to then change formation to something that's, I think, is more realistic with what you want this season? To me, at the moment, the data saying play 5-4-1. I think the right formation right now is probably 4-4-2. But for those that have already got 3 elite strikers with good fixtures and maybe haven't got the returns from them, it's hard to come off that. Are you really going to sell Gyökeres now with these Arsenal fixtures? Something I'm considering. I don't have Gabriel, so I could move off Gyökeres, bring him down, upgrade a defender to Gabriel, get what many would consider the better 3 Arsenal players, and then put myself into 4-4-2 and maybe move into that formation ahead of everyone else doing it. And I do think it will happen. When I recorded with Man On last year, we used to do pods now and again about what we was expecting from the next block of fixtures, what the next bandwagons would be in terms of players, teams and things like that, and the need and the benefits and gains from getting onto those bandwagons earlier than everyone else. This bandwagon, I do think, is coming in FPL, that we will end up more people playing 4-4-2. I think it will take longer for people to make the full development to 5-4-1. I think it could happen before the end of the season. But up until the midway point of the season, I think it will be enough of a challenge for people to convince themselves to play permanently 4 at the back. But I do think we'll get that way. I do think we'll get to 4-4-2 quite soon. And I think the quicker we can accept it, the quicker we can start making plans towards it, the better. Those that adapt it the quickest may end up getting the better gains, particularly because defenders offer more value for money than everyone else, frees up money to then spend in other positions to upgrade players in those spots. I know a lot of people are looking at quite cheap midfielders. If we're playing 4 at the back every week, we might be able to afford a midfielder of something like, thinking off the top of my head here, but Saka, Gordon, Semenyo, Mbeumo or something might become the 4 rather than having to own 6 million midfielders. Not there's anything wrong with Ismail Assar or Mo Kudus or Caicedo or players like that, but we may be able to get players with higher ceilings than those players and more upside potential if we commit to 4 at the back quicker. Particularly those that haven't wildcarded yet, I think this is a serious consideration. But so, yeah, conclusion for this pod, I think 4-4-2, we need to get there quicker. 5-4-1 long term, understand why you might not be ready to make that move yet. It's not what we're used to in FPL, and we are creatures of habit to a certain point. Thanks for listening today, everyone. So be back next week with some more thoughts on my team ahead of the next game week. But until then, I will speak to you soon. Cheers. I will do this.